In the light of love and the warmth of this family, we gather to seek, to sustain, and to share. A few anonymous words to light our chalice. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to Cross Street Chapel's Sunday service. I'm grateful for your presence here, for those who've joined us in person, as well as those who are following us online. And I hope that whatever it is that you've come into this space to seek, whether it's a place for tears and sadness, to share sorrow with one another, a chance to celebrate and perhaps laugh alongside another person. Maybe you've come seeking a few words of wisdom, and I hope they will be heard. Perhaps you've come looking for a chance to connect with one another or to rest with the divine. Whatever it is that you're seeking, I hope it will be found, as well as a warm community. And I know you'll find a warm community here, because I've been here quite a while, and I am very honored that we have such a gracious and beautiful congregation, inside and out. You may have noticed, for those of us here in person, that we have a few extra chairs. I have been reminded of this for several weeks, and yet it still shocked me. We have work that's going to be done in the Percival Suite starting very soon. So our tea and coffee will be in the Percival Suite, but you'll notice a conspicuous absence of chairs. Sonia discovered a conspicuous absence of kettles, but there's enough to get us by for tea and coffee today. And then for the following 2 weeks, we will be elsewhere for the tea and coffee, and I'll mention that again later on. But just, big changes are happening, just as we've had the carpet replaced here recently. We're going to have the floor redone and the walls painted in the Percival Suite, and we're grateful for that work to be done. So we lit our candle with some anonymous words, someone unknown, invoking us to light and love and warmth and compassion. We turn to the more known words of Margaret Fuller. Harmony exists in difference, no less than in likeness. Harmony exists in difference, no less than in likeness. And this feels particularly relevant from my own ears as a musician, knowing the resonance that chords can produce and the beauty that different notes striking have. So with that in mind, let us sing, although we'll be trying to sing the same tune, number 43 in the Purple Book, Gather the Spirits by Jim Scott, hymn number 43.
Gather
Let us turn now to a time of prayer. This is followed by our covenant, which is printed in your order of worship, and I'm grateful for you to follow along at that point. But for now, we turn to these words. Tender gardener, we have brought with us not only ourselves, but our assumptions. Inside of us, we may find not only our love and compassion, but also our prejudice. Tender gardener, fill us with doubt. Remove from us the certainties which we have built up with poor logic and unsound reason. Gently teach us and guide our shoots so that they may grow towards you and draw upon your energy. Tender gardener, remind us that as a tree grows, no new branches break out of its hard, brittle bark. Only where it has been pruned, where the core of its being touches the sky and is nourished by the sun, will it grow. As a tree grows, so let us as well. With each day, let the lessons enrich our souls, our spirits and mind. But in our own pruning, do not let us be injured beyond our means. As the wound inflicted on the heart of a person is lasting and painful. But may we remember this so as not to harm the rest of creation, the rest of this glorious garden. Instead, give us the strength of judgment and compassion and love. Amen. And please read with me our covenant. We gather here in sacred fellowship to witness the fullness of our lives and all life, to hold and be held, tell stories and listen, to be renewed and renew the world. We speak with care and patience. We act with gentleness and compassion. We forgive each other and ourselves. In faith that we build beloved community, we renew our covenant today. Amen. Who here has heard of writer's block? Heard of writer's block? If you're unfamiliar, it's that notion, especially for particularly writers, surprisingly, that they sit down to write, they're at the typewriter or the computer, and the thoughts don't come out. For example, maybe a minister who's sat trying to prepare a sermon and just the ideas aren't there. You feel like things are ticking along. This is not a story about writer's block. It's a story about painter's block. It's about a woman who loved painting. It wasn't her daily work, but it was something that she was really passionate about. As a member here, Peter Sampson loves to point out the word amateur means lover, one who loves painting in this instance. So she was very, very good at painting, and she loved it, and it was this passion that encompassed a very large element of her life. But one day she discovered she had painter's block. So she just looked at the easel, which was in her studio, it was in the attic, and she just stared at it, and she didn't know what to do. So what do you think she did? There are no wrong answers. Think about for yourself. If you've suffered writer's block or painter's block or had any of those circumstances where your mind is not willing to do the job that it's set out to do, what do you do to break that impasse? Sit and breathe, thank you. She did that. She sat down, she meditated, she breathed. She had, because she was a Unitarian, a little sort of altar with a chalice, and nothing came. Right, Tina, what did you say? She made a cup of tea. She made loads of cups of tea. And she sort of tried to engage with that experience of seeing the steam rise from the kettle and the aromatic smell of the spices as the tea was steeping, and yet still nothing. Anything else? What else might she have done, Anne? She doodled, yes. She had a journal especially for doodles. And she doodled, and then she would set that down and she would step back to look at the easel and nothing. So, anyone else? What else might she have done? William?
The other hand.
She painted with the other hand. Great idea. She did that as well. She had a practice sketch, and she took, and the painting was, it felt sort of refreshing to an instance, but she was not happy with that, so she tore it up and set it aside. Anything else? And it's all right. Those are great suggestions, but unfortunately for her, they didn't work. So she just stared at that painting, for the rest of the day. And then later on in the evening, she had a visit from her niece, and she loved her niece. It was a beautiful relationship that they had. They got along. They had the sort of shared interests, and she was just captivated to hear what happened at school, to engage with her niece with whatever was on her mind. One of the things that they shared were quality streets. So these will be, now, I say this, we're not allowed to have food in here. And I have to confess, I haven't gotten a special dispensation for today. So none of the food will be consumed in the chapel. These will all be available afterwards during the tea and coffee. So they shared quality streets. And she would take one. And then her niece would take one. And they would do that, and they'd have a bit of a box. Not the whole box, but they would share it off and on. And they'd have a great conversation, and the niece would go home at the end of the day. And then the painter would go to sleep. So the next day, it was much the same. She had the day off, and she just looked at the painting. She attempted, drawing with her left hand. She doodled. She made a cup of tea. She just sort of sat and reflected, and nothing seemed to help. She actually got an easel out, and she tried something, but she wasn't happy with it, so she tore it up and set it aside. And then in the afternoon, again, her niece visited, and they had a great conversation. She was really just enamored to find out all the goings-on at school. And like I said, they shared their quality streets. And she would have one, and her niece would have one. But her niece was very perceptive and could tell something was off, and that her auntie seemed a bit sad. And she went home and she mentioned this to her mother, and they talked about sadness and depression, and sometimes we get stuck in things and we're not always able to get out. And they talked about what the niece could do for her auntie. I'm not going to tell you what they did. That comes later. So the next day, final difficult day, and again, she's trying all of these things and nothing's helping. And the niece comes in the afternoon, and she's really excited. She's giddy. And the aunt notices this and says, "What's going on? Why are you so excited and so happy?" And her niece says, "Auntie, I made an art. I made an art for you." And she had taken all of the wrappers, because she stashed them in her pocket, and had made them into what she thought was a beautiful, beautiful painting. And her auntie said, "That is gorgeous. That is such a gorgeous painting. I am going to go up. I'm going to give it pride of place in my studio so that I can look to it." And she did just that. She put it right in the window so that she could observe. And but again, she was having her own difficulty with the art. So she just stared at the easel, and she had a couch in her studio, and it was a very dark night, so I'm going to turn out the lights to represent that. And she fell asleep in the sofa. It was a restless sleep. She couldn't see much, she couldn't think much, she couldn't figure out what it was she was supposed to do with her painting. When she finally got to sleep in the late hours at night, then she woke up just in time to see the sun rise. And as the sun rose, she looked at her easel, and she could see all of the colors from her niece's artwork emblazoned on it. And she knew what to paint. Thank you. You now have a chance to share your times of your blocks, your joys, your sorrows, your trials, and your triumphs. If you want to share these publicly, it's very tempting to eat these. if you want to share these publicly, please do come forward and light a candle. If you have something to say, come to the microphone so those listening online, as well as those using the loop system, may be able to hear you. If you are online, please type into the chat box. I will read your message out. You're invited to light a candle in silence if you so wish. And as always, if you want to hold your life in your heart and remain seated, know that your presence here, simply your presence, is enough. And I'd like to light 2 candles. Well, I'll light 1 candle representing 2 things. One is Thomas has been having a bit of difficult week at school, so he's at home with Catherine, hopefully sort of recovering from what seems to be a little bit of a cold. So a candle for them, and a candle as well. I'm sorry, this is a shock. for Tina, who joins us today as our student minister on her placement. So welcome, Tina.
Yeah, sure, of course. I light this candle for my grandma, Kiki Ben Gandhi. She passed away exactly a year ago on the 13th of July, so it's been a year. I want to celebrate her life because she was a phenomenal lady, and even though she's passed away, she still plays an impact in our lives as a family. So I just want to celebrate her, really, and prayers for her soul for wherever she is. Thank you.
I light that candle for 2 homecomings. One is for my Australian family who are now reunited in Cambridge and will be up here in a fortnight, 10 days or so, which will be wonderful. And to be reunited with Aaron and playing that piano. What joy. Lovely to have you back, if only for one Sunday.
for all those joys and sorrows here spoken, and those that remain silently in our hearts. Let us sing now our next hymn in the Purple Book, number 128, Our World is One World, by Cecily Taylor, hymn number 128. Is this all right, or is that a bit much better? Okay. Our reading today comes from Audre Lorde, the African-American writer who described herself as a black, lesbian, mother, warrior poet, who dedicated both her life and her creative talent to confronting and addressing injustices of racism, sexism, classism, and homophobia. And I'm going to turn that down just a slight because I'm getting a bit of reverb. We will find a happy medium. I think that's it. So, this is from Age, Race, Class, and Sex, Women Redefining Difference. It is a lifetime pursuit for each one of us to extract distortions of racism, ageism, heterosexism, elitism, and classism from our living at the same time as we recognize, reclaim, and divine those differences upon which they are imposed. For we have all been raised in a society where these distortions were endemic within our living. Too often we pour the energy needed for recognizing and exploring difference into pretending these differences are insurmountable barriers, or that they do not exist at all. This results in a voluntary isolation, or false and treacherous connections. Either way, we do not develop tools for using human difference as a springboard for creative change within our lives. We speak not of human difference, but of human deviance. Institutionalized rejection of difference is an absolute necessity in a profit economy, which needs outsiders as surplus people. As members of such an economy, we have all been programmed to respond to the human differences between us with fear and loathing, and to handle that difference in one of three ways: ignore it, and if that is not possible, copy it if we think it is dominant, or destroy it if we think it is subordinate. But we have no patterns for relating across our human differences as equals. As a result, those differences have been misnamed and misused in the service of separation and confusion. The words of Audre Lorde. From age, race, class, and sex, women redefining difference. So let us return now to a time of prayer. May we feel your guiding hand as we seek to create with you a better world. As we dance through this cosmic backdrop, protect us from harm and discouragement. As we tackle injustices in each instance, at each opportunity, and gaze upon the whole to better witness the world, to provide us with the strength to carry out our convictions, and discretion to care for the whole of creation, collectively and in our best capacities. In this healing, ensure we are not left out, and that our needs are tended to, as the smallest flowers drink from the same rainfall as the mighty oak. And though our brokenness gives us a staff to aid our fellows, so too do our challenges often weigh us down. May our burdens be lifted, our cold hearts warmed, and sully spirits raised. Amen. And so let us now enter into a period of silence for reflection, meditation, contemplation, and personal prayer. Thank you, Aaron. Let us turn now to our next hymn in the Purple Book, number 164, The Secret Pulse of Freedom Throbs by Ivan Abaro. Now this is a different tune to what's written in the book, and we've sung it once before, a few years ago, so Aaron's going to play through it completely this first time. Thank you. Hymn number 164. Hell is other people. Who's familiar with that expression? Who knows where that expression's from? Its origins. Sartre, exactly. You ever have those days when you just crave solitude, when you want to be alone? And how then do you feel when you can't get that? When the whole world seems to be imposing upon you, pressing up against your precious, precious time. It can be frustrating, right? We see this every morning as we drive Thomas to school. Impatient cars filled with angry people who are wildly gesticulating, "Get out of my way, can't you see I'm in a hurry?" And I promise that is not us. And this is how most people understand that expression. Hell is other people. I think road rage is probably the most apt metaphor. Get out of my way. Yes, the expression comes from the French philosopher Sartre, Jean-Paul Sartre. Sorry. It occurs in his play No Exit, which brings together three people into hell. But in this case, hell is a single room. They can't leave, hence the title, and the play explores the relationships as they unfold in this environment. Despite the widespread use of the phrase, Sartre actually meant something different by it. His meaning was that in our relationships with other people, their existence, their mere existence, serves as a certain judgment in our minds, knowing that they are there and that they are able to judge us. We subsequently judge ourselves. One way is described as that they provide the measurements, the tools by which we judge ourselves. Thus, knowing there is someone else who can watch us serves to bring us into our own hell. Hell is other people. Not the frustration of their presence, but the self-awareness that they bring out in us. This, of course, does not negate that acquired meaning. Sartre and the cynic can both be right. We need alone time, and at those points, encounters when we encounter other people might indeed feel like hell. So let's consider that an occasional interpretation. But in this case, the long-standing perennial view belongs to the author, that we fashion our own hell by thinking that we are being judged by other people, and so we consequently judge ourselves. 7 years before he penned No Exit, a German theologian was grappling with the question as well of relationships. Though I think in a way he drew a similar conclusion, though voiced it in a significantly different way. Martin Buber's seminal work, I and Thou, was published in 1937, and its dense, mystic prose presents relationships as simple in their complexity. We have the capacity to view other people in two ways: as an it, as an object, partial for use by us, bounded by its qualities, or we can see other things as a thou, full and whole, self-actualizing, filled with multitudes. The it is limited, the thou limitless. The it is temporal, the thou is eternal. The it is objectified, the thou transcends classification. And when he says I and thou, although a great deal is focused on people, it is not restricted to the human realm. His first example of the thou is a tree. More importantly, though, than simply stating how we view others, Buber reveals that our perception of others naturally shades our perception of ourselves, and thus it sounds a lot like Sartre. Through a thou, a person becomes I. That's how he writes it. The way I read this is that when we accept and recognize the fullness of the person across the table from us, when we see them as holy and with multitudes and beyond any of the earthly constraints that hold them, when we see their soul in effect, then we are transformed. We are no longer an object. We are no longer limited by our bounds, by the universe, or by classification. We recognize our holiness, our multitudes, our soul. Through a thou, a person becomes I. When I see you, when I truly see you, I become whole. I see myself as holy and sacred. Buber perhaps could have said, heaven is other people. When we encounter another person and do not judge them, then perhaps we stop judging ourselves. Not an easy task, mind you. If there is something more challenging than reading Buber, it is living up to his view. We so easily fail to see the person in front of us. We see their gender, their race, their economic disposition. We see their age. And when I say see, we make a note of it, and then we fit them into a stereotype as different, as unobtainably different. Decades after Buber and Sartre explored this coin with its two different sides, Audre Lorde was calling for a recognition of difference, but not in the way that would produce hell. Rather, her work in the liberation movements of the 1970s was to create better coalitions for building heaven on earth. She sought to give a voice to the marginalized of the marginalized. The world was that she was seeing at that time, these renewed efforts to advance civil rights, women's rights, and gay rights. And as a black lesbian, she was uniquely poised to witness and participate in these movements in a way. And yet, she witnessed the exclusion of herself and others from each of these spheres because of her multitudes. She witnessed the exclusion inherent within these movements at this time. She saw each one acting within its own silo. Her talks and essays are filled with a prescient understanding of the need to recognize difference. Her perhaps most famous phrase, "The master's tools will not dismantle the master's house," was a call for white feminists to recognize that their racial bias had aided the patriarchy, that they were connected. We may now refer to this as intersectionality, the recognition that oppression is meted out differently depending on the different identities that people hold. But she was talking about this decades before the term was coined. Our reading looked at a talk she gave on differences within the feminist movement of her day. Our society presents 3 ways of dealing with difference. Firstly, to ignore it. I don't see color. There, racism is solved. And that may sound glib, but how often do we try to just gloss over these challenging conversations? And if you can't ignore it, she says you have a choice. If you are marginalized, you can try and copy the difference, try to emulate it, to fit in. Be that good person, the tribute to your race, the tribute to your gender or your age. Or, if you're the dominant party, you may wish to destroy the difference. And being the dominant party, you may have the strength to do so. Preserve the status quo above all else. In each of these instances, of course, people's inherent being is denied. They are limited by our presumptions and prejudices and assumptions and stereotypes. Buber would say that we create with this an I-it relationship. And it may, feel strange and perhaps slightly confrontational to discuss this in our chapel. We celebrate difference. Here, people can fully be themselves, can't they? We've said it in our covenant. We say it every Sunday. I'm sure all of our relationships are as full and meaningful all the time as that I-thou relationship. But are they? I know my interactions can be less than full at times. And I hope with reflection and effort I can better tend to our community's needs and to hear the person who is speaking to me. Lord argues that difference can be recognized without tearing coalitions apart. It takes patience and strength. It takes the ability to listen fully and honestly and to subject oneself to scrutiny, to trust the person describing their experience. And, like Buber, these are beautiful words, but a tall order. However, to fail to do this limits the strength and the power of marginalized groups, essentially doing the work of the oppressor for them. So it is all the more important that our chapel explores and works towards being ever more supportive of the oppressed, a place for all marginalized to speak, including those marginalized of the marginalized. I suppose the jury is still out whether hell is other people, that we can remain judgmental with the added sorrow of judging ourselves. Perhaps, though, the jury will return proclaiming people to be capable of I-thou relationships, honoring the divine in one another. In any event, if we are to create this just and beautiful world, we have to do it with many, many hands. Many different hands. That can be a challenge, holding the hand of a stranger, but it can also be a blessing. May it be so. Amen. A few notices before we sing our final hymn. If you're in need of pastoral care, please speak with me or write to minister@crossstreetchapel.org.uk. Please do volunteer. We're always grateful to have people provide readings, assist with greeting, the IT. How's the IT been today? On and off. Better than last week. That's fantastic. We try to make the IT as simple as possible. And as I always say, if something goes wrong, it is my fault. I will hold up my hand and acknowledge that. Is there anyone to help with the tea and coffee today? Thank you, William. So as we said, it will be in the Percival Suite, but this will be the last week for a few weeks. And just don't be shocked when you go in and there's only a few chairs there. Tea and coffee, yes, will be in the Percival Suite after the service. We're also grateful for any donations that can assist the mission of our chapel. You can donate online at justgiving.com/Cross Street Chapel Manchester. You can email me about setting up a standing order, and if you wish to join our mailing list, right, as well. If you're here in person, we have a retiring collection along with envelopes if you're a UK taxpayer, so we may claim gift aid. And if you are a regular in-person giver, we have an envelope scheme whereby you don't have to write down your details every week. Speak with me if you're interested in that. Our Friday recital is next Friday, the 28th. It's going to feature the Brown Mountain Lightning Bugs, which is a folk duo who come to us all the way from the States. So please do join us if you're able. Tell other people if you're able. If you're not, please do spread the word, because we want to create as vibrant and large an atmosphere to welcome and recognize them. All our recitals are free, but we are grateful for any donations which go to the artists to recognize their time, talent, and energy. Yes, Anne?
Is the 28th a week on Friday?
Yeah, sorry, when I meant, yes. Not this Friday, not upcoming, but the week after. Thank you for that clarification, Anne.
Thank you.
Welcome. And then finally, on the 6th of August, which is a Sunday from, I think it's 12 to 1. Thank you, Joe. There is a service at Lincoln Square where the Peace Gardens are to mark the anniversary of the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That's done in conjunction with Manchester City Council and Mayors for Peace. So that will be after the service. So please do join us if you're able for that. That's 12 to 1 on Sunday, the 6th of August. Are there any announcements from the congregation? Let us then sing our final hymn, Billy Taylor and Dick Dallas's I Wish I Knew How, hymn number 70, I Wish I Knew How.
Sorry, I seem to put 79 up.
Thank you, Aaron, for that fantastic music. Thank you, Joe, for our IT. Thank you, Sonia, for our gorgeous flowers. Moved, but not without sight. Thank you for greeting as well as helping to set up today. Thank you, William, for the tea and coffee that we are about to enjoy. And thank you to all of you for creating and sharing worship today. We close with the words of Elliot Page. This world would be a whole lot better if we just made an effort to be less horrible to one another. If we took just 5 minutes to recognize each other's beauty instead of attacking each other for our differences. That's not hard. It's really an easier and better way to live. And ultimately, it saves lives.